Hi, Coffee 365. It's evening. Here's a Bible. This video's for Dan McClellan.
Hey, what can I do for you?
Hey, Doc. In my professional life, I have the opportunity to sometimes recover certain objects. And today I found a good book.
All right, let's see it. And also, it's Hellboy today.
From the Daughters of St. Paul. This is apparently a Dewey version. Well, a Douay-Rheims, but it's a calendar revision.
So that Bible actually has four main historical layers to it. The oldest goes back to 1582, which is when an English translation of the New Testament was published in Rheims in France as part of the Catholic Counter-Reformation, as part of providing alternatives to the Protestant English translations that were coming out in that time period, particularly the Geneva Bible. And it was translated directly from the Latin Vulgate. Now, the Old Testament had apparently been translated around the same time, but they didn't have the funds to publish it. And so that didn't get published until it came out in 2 volumes between 1609 and 1610. And that was not published in Rheims, that was published in Douay in France. And so when you had the two of them published together, they are referred to as the Douay-Rheims Bible, but they were published separately from each other. So your Bible has the Douay version of the Old Testament. Now, in 1749 to 1752, there was an English bishop named Richard Challoner who published his own revision of the Douay-Rheims Bible, and he compared it to the King James Version, and he omitted the Apocrypha. And so he moved this thoroughly Catholic Bible that was very technical and in many places difficult to understand a little closer to the flagship Protestant English translation, the King James Version. And then in the mid-20th century, in an effort to make the text easier to understand, a group published the Confraternity Edition, which was intended to update the language and make it easier for a modern audience to understand. And so your New Testament is based on the Confraternity's revision of the Challoner revision of the Rheims Bible. And then your Old Testament seems to be based directly on the Douay version of the Old Testament, but it has probably undergone a number of revisions since then. So you've got 4 historical layers in that Bible.
Copyright 55, but I read somewhere that it sort of went out of print in the 60s.
There was a decision on the part of the Catholic leadership in 1943 to allow vernacular translations of the Bible to be made from the Hebrew and Greek manuscripts rather than the Latin Vulgate, which allowed Catholic Bibles to be produced that were based directly on those earlier manuscripts. And so the Douay-Rheims Bible fell out of favor, and went out of print somewhere in the 60s, although there are reprints that happen quite frequently these days.
From what I've been able to pick up so far, it seems sort of like its origin is pushing back against the Protestant Reformation, and I found a whole lot that you probably understand a lot better than I do. So because you can kind of just pull it out of your head, can you give us some context on this particular translation? It's apparently directly out of Latin Vulgate. It claims critical use of ancient sources. In short, Doc, what's this about? Thanks, bud.
Yeah, sounds like you already got most of it. It was a very influential English translation of the Vulgate among Catholics for a long time. That was part of the Catholic Counter-Reformation, and it even influenced the King James translation of the New Testament. Because the Rheims version came out 29 years before the King James version came out, it was available to the King James translators, and we have some of the notes from one of the translators that occasionally mentions that they consulted it and used it to aid in their revision of the Bishop's Bible, which is the text they were revising and updating for the King James Version.